Welcome to Visionary Women's 5th Annual International Women's Day Virtual Summit. It's been a year marked by unprecedented challenges for women worldwide. Today, we'll hear from a group of problem solvers, thought leaders, and visionaries who are working to create meaningful change, each using their unique platform to advance social progress for women. Kristen Bell and Ariana Huffington will discuss the incredible impact of women peace builders.
We know that when women are included in negotiating peace agreements are 35% more likely to last 15 years or longer.
Ellen Pompeo and Nina Shaw exchange ideas about pay equity and the fight to improve working conditions for all women.
If you only have white men working on your board, or whether it's your school board, whether it's your company board, you're only getting the lens of what white men see.
And female founder and CEO Cindy Crawford speaks out.
I have learned a lot over the years, and you can agree with me or not. If you don't, please don't be snarky on my Instagram, but I don't want to be quieted.
Plus, we'll hear from Sharon Stone, Maria Shriver, Ruchira Gupta, and much more, including the presentation of our $100,000 Economic Empowerment Prize. It all starts right now.
Happy International Women's Day.
The 2022 International Women's Day Virtual Summit, a global vision for a better future. Brought to you by Visionary Women in association with Women Moving Millions. Executive produced by Shelley Reed and Thea Andrews-Wolf. Presented by Maurice and Paul Marciano and media partner The Wall Street Journal. Please welcome Anne-Marie Slaughter and Nilu Razi Howe, opening our show with the status of women in 2022. Anne-Marie Slaughter's high-altitude resume ranges from a professor of law at Harvard to dean of Princeton School of Public and International Affairs to a top State Department official under Hillary Clinton. Along the way, she's written 8 books, including Unfinished Business, Men, Women, Work, Family. But she initially came to prominence in the public eye when she published a piece in The Atlantic titled Why Women Still Can't Have It All. In the manifesto, she envisioned a path for helping women balance family life with their workplace responsibilities. She asked readers to reassess the feminist narrative that, quote, championing women's rights meant doing everything we could to advance women to the top. Today, she sits down with Nilu Razi Howe, a national security expert, to discuss the status of women in 2022.
Anne-Marie, I am so excited to be with you today on International Women's Day to kick off the 6th Annual Visionary Women's Summit. The focus of this year's summit is the status of women in 2022, and there's truly no better person than you to lead this conversation. So thank you for joining us today.
Well, so Nilu, first of all, I have to say how much I enjoy just being in conversation with you. And my pleasure at being able to be with all of you. It's a very important moment for women to be coming together and sharing visions. I hope better visions for gender equality, but frankly for the future of the country.
Throughout your life, you've spearheaded many challenging conversations around complex issues, including a really important one that was launched when in 2012, 10 years ago, The Atlantic published your article, Why Women Still Can't Have It All. In this article, which quickly became the most read article in The Atlantic's history, in which you turned into a book, Unfinished Business, Women, Men, Work, Family, you challenged the narrative of the lean-in culture and the fundamentally elusive nature of work-life balance for women, weaving in your own personal story and some very difficult decisions you had to make when you were at the apex of your career in order to take care of family. Now, as we enter the 10-year anniversary of your seminal work, it'd be great if you could tell us how, as someone who's studied and been a thought leader in international relations and foreign policy and national security since the 1970s, you came to write about gender equality and then about care.
And it is extraordinary to me to think that it's been 10 years since that Atlantic article. It's really, it's been a critical 10 years. It was also mostly my 50s. And that's a pretty pivotal moment for many women in careers and frankly, family too. But you're starting in just the right place, because when I published my Atlantic article, the millions of people who read it didn't know who I was, right? They knew there was this woman and she was in the State Department and she's writing about how being in the State Department and having an adolescent son who was just having a rocky adolescence changed her life. But they didn't realize that, I was a foreign policy person. As you say, I studied for international relations starting in college. My mother's Belgian. I always say I was the product of an international affair. And I always thought I was a feminist because I was raised to have a career. My father was a lawyer. I went to law school. I was a law professor. I always knew I wanted to do foreign policy. I knew I wanted to be in the State Department. So what people didn't understand is I was kind of on a glide path. I mean, I'd had various moments that had not gone according to plan, of course, as that is inevitable. But fundamentally, in 2009, when I left what was then the Woodrow Wilson School, Princeton School of Public and International Affairs. I'd been dean there for 7 years. I'd been writing on foreign policy. I'd been running study groups on foreign policy. I went into the State Department as the director of policy planning. That was a job, a dream job. It's the big think job in the State Department, and I was the first woman to hold it. And I'm working for Hillary Clinton, whom I didn't know, but came to admire very quickly. And everything's going fine. And then, I have two sons and my husband who are back in Princeton. My sons then are 11 and 9, 11, 12, 13. Those are big middle school years. And everything that I thought I knew about, yes, lean in, work hard. I'd always told young women, just try hard enough. If you want it enough, you'll get it. I wanted it and I had it. And, life happened. And again, lots of people's kids probably have, even stormier adolescences. People get divorced. God forbid you have child with special needs. People die. I suddenly realized, wait a minute, I can't control this. And critically, I know that I am making the right decision. In fact, it didn't even feel like a choice. My kid really did need his father and me to do our best. We couldn't promise I was going to fix it if I came home, but that's what went into that article. And of course, it changed my life. It was a tsunami. Millions of people read it. Suddenly, all these people don't know that I do foreign policy, but they know that I've voiced something many of them felt. It had been said before, but it was a key moment. And that was a kind of turning point in my career.
It was such a relief to read your article and read your book and acknowledge that it's just not that easy. Right. Always. And sometimes life comes at you. What was the response to your book? Its popularity in the conversation that exploded suggests that it was considered radical at the time. Were you expecting this response?
No. I mean, so again, the article's 2012, and nobody expected that response either because, people had written that article before. People had written that article in 1989 and 1999, and here I am writing it in 2012. It was not news that it was hard for women. I think what was news was that I was very successful. I wasn't somebody who wrote usually on gender. And I'm suddenly saying, we need to rethink because I've had every advantage and I still had to make a choice that most men don't have to make. And that's part of the issue. And that then plunged me into this really false debate with Sheryl Sandberg. I mean, it wasn't that I don't think you should do a lot of the things she was arguing. I do. And I had told people. But I was basically saying you don't control a lot of this and you shouldn't blame yourself when life happens to you. And obviously Sheryl understands that as well as anybody does now. That next 3 years between 2012 and 2015, when I published Unfinished Business, that was revelatory for me because I went into those 3 years thinking everybody should have a career who can have a choice. And the work my father did is more important than the work my mother did. My mother was a homemaker, a stay-at-home mom. She was also an artist, but not till later. I kept thinking about this, and I came out thinking, wait a minute, we've got this wrong. As feminists, and this is mostly white affluent feminists in the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, we're trying to be our fathers, and we're downgrading the work that women have always done. And yet I wouldn't be standing here. I would not have the life I have. I wouldn't have the support I have if it wasn't for the work of my mother. And that work of care, that work that, I mean, we're both mothers. We're investing in our children. We're investing in the future of the country to begin with. It's really important work. But it's the work that human beings need to grow and flourish, but frankly, we also need to be connected to others. So after those 3 years, my book was saying something quite different than the article. It was saying we need to elevate the value of care, and only when care and competition, which I just used to capture care and career, are valued equally, will we get to gender equality.
So if we fast forward to today, or even let's start 2 years ago when the pandemic hit, that's been a really interesting shift in terms of how it's impacted women, how it's impacted the importance of caregiving in both very positive and very negative ways. Where are we right now?
Well, in some ways, we've clearly taken a couple of steps back. We actually haven't had a she session. There was the idea we thought that many more women had quit their jobs than men. That was initially true because in the April of 2020, when suddenly kids are at home and school's gone online, yes, more women dropped out, but also there are more women in hospitality. And the restaurant industry, the hotel industry, those were the hardest hit. So it looked like it was disproportionately affecting women. Overall, that wasn't true. But what then became true, and this is more insidious, many more women went part-time. Many more women, again, refused promotions. It's the microcosm of how, yes, women have managed to keep working, that their families would not stay afloat if they haven't. But they've then made choices because they've had to make those choices because of the children or their parents or vulnerable members of their family that guarantee they're not going to end up in the same place as men do, that their incomes are going to take a hit, and of course their promotions are going to take a hit. And when you saw that collapsed into those 2 years of the pandemic, and unbelievably, you saw that liquor store workers were essential workers, but daycare workers weren't. You realized how far we are from valuing care. You realize that the people in charge are still overwhelmingly white, affluent men who had a wife at home and who just didn't think that you can't work unless you've got school or daycare or people coming in. And, you know, Germany, New Zealand, Norway, those are all countries led by women. They somehow managed to keep their daycares and their schools open in ways that helped, and again, not just women, parents, but it's still women bearing most of the caregiving. You, on the one hand, had women making a lot of choices that are going to set them back, and on the other hand, you have a radical demonstration that we don't value care. I mean, again, liquor stores, it's just astounding. The last thing I will say, though, the silver lining, but it's not enough, is that for many of us who've been arguing for flexible work for decades, that you could do work a couple days from home every week, or if your kid has an issue at school or has to stay home, you could be home. That we've proved. But staying home with a child for a couple days or a week is not the same as homeschooling and having, you know, your children there while you're trying to do what we're doing right now.
If the pandemic doesn't highlight the importance and value of providing care, what will? What is it going to take for the social norms in this country to change so that we can embrace the importance of that and create an environment necessary for everyone to thrive?
Yeah. I mean, this is, you know, the rage of so many women over these past 2 years, and the rage plus exhaustion, right? So that many women, you know, felt like, how can this be? But they're so unbelievably busy trying to juggle everything. And again, if you were an essential worker, let's say you're a healthcare worker, so daycare workers weren't essential, but healthcare, yes, then you also had to be juggling, you know, trying to get your family taken care of while you were the essential worker. I think, honestly, I've come to think we're not going to change it until we put caregiving parents in power. That isn't just women, and not all women have kids. Almost all women have some caregiving responsibilities. And as we get older and our parents need us, but again, there are so many people in our society who need care. You just can't have people making decisions for whom all of that is invisible labor, unpaid, invisible labor. And of course, even when we have daycare, we pay daycare workers less than dog walkers and, again, bartenders. So I truly think the long-term change, if we really want to build an infrastructure of care, you can make all the economic arguments you want. You have to have people in power who realize this is front of mind, right? Front of mind, as it would be for you and me. I remember snow days when I was a dean, and of course Princeton kept going, but the schools all closed, and I'm there with two toddlers. My husband was commuting for a while back to Harvard, and I'm thinking, what am I supposed to do here? Do I put them on a sled and take them? So but for the people who create snow days, that just or the people, it was more the people at Princeton who should have said, fine, if the schools are closed, you don't have to come in.
I used to hide my kids in the office and close the door during snow days because that was my only option. We've seen the president struggle with the infrastructure bill, paid family leave, and Build Back Better agenda. Have these issues become polarized and politicized? And it seems to me that they're fundamentally not political, but humanistic. And it also seems like potentially they've been pulled into sort of the bigger polarization that's going on in society.
Yeah, there's no question that they have been polarized in ways that is terrible for us, and terrible for us relative to our peer countries. People come from other countries in Europe or Asia, and they realize we don't have paid family leave, right? And they think, what are you supposed to do? You're going to give birth and go back to work, 2 days later? They're incredulous. And the same without a really good system of high quality, affordable, accessible daycare, elder care for again, daycare not just for children, but from whoever needs it. So really, I think of it as a national security matter, almost, in the sense of our prosperity and how we invest in the next generation. One thing I think that would help, though, is that so often it's been career women versus stay-at-home moms. So what we have to do is to think this is about paid or unpaid care. So if you are the caregiver in your family, you're a woman or a man who is staying home to invest in the next generation of the country, you should get Social Security. Your work should be counted as part of our GDP, because a lot of this, all the way back to Richard Nixon in 1971, where we almost passed universal child care with the support of both parties overwhelmingly. Pat Buchanan convinced Richard Nixon that this was the left's way of destroying the family, getting women out of the home, and having some kind of socialist daycare system. That's ridiculous. Family daycare is great as long as, we're sure it meets safety standards. Having kids in your home, you being the primary caregiver, that's great too. It's not an either or. It's valuing care however it's provided to enable parents, and again, caregivers, to do what they need to do. And I think that framing is very important politically.
This is such a critical issue, and I'm just sitting here thinking, please run for president so you can make this happen. One of the other things that you had, one of the recommendations you had made in your written work was the importance of making primary caregiving cool, so that it doesn't sort of have this gender stereotype that's attached to it. Have we made it cool yet? What do we need to do to make caregiving cool?
Yeah. And this is as much to women as it is to men. It's cooler, and it really is striking when you look at many very successful women, certainly CEOs, and they have what I call lead parent spouses, and that is often opposite sex, but it can be same sex. But the idea of being lead parent has helped. And indeed, in This Is Us, the TV show, one of my friends texted me, she was watching, and she said, somebody's being a lead parent. A man was being a lead parent. I think that really helps. I think emphasizing the value to men of having really much closer relationships with their children. And obviously, I'm very close to my father, and he was not there. I'm not saying you have to, but I will say my son's relationship to my husband is much more like traditionally a mom relationship. In other words, they turn to him when they need things. And we all like to be needed. And in fact, often you see as people age, it's the moms that have the deeper relationships with the family because the man's been at work. And so you want to start talking about what people get instead of just what they give. And the other thing is, and I've seen this with my own sons, one of my sons is a great cook because my husband's the cook. And, his girlfriends really, they think that's cool. They really think that, having a man who's as competent in the house as he is wherever else he might be is the sign of just a competent person and a man who is just like somebody being handy. So I think a lot of what has to happen is that we as women reframe how we talk about masculinity, how we talk about competence, how we have our expectations. And again, we have to fight our own sexism because we do have a kind of, oh, I've got it. I somehow magically know what to do with the baby. I didn't, my husband and I he read everything. I kind of winged it, but we were equal.
It's interesting you say that because a few of my also working mom girlfriends and I talk about how we're the adjustment variable, and anything that has to happen, we just take it on and we get it done. But you're absolutely right that we're just playing back into this totally. Gender stereotype when we do this, and we're enabling something that maybe isn't positive. And if we can pivot for a second to this question of gender equity in general, this year, the issue of abortion rights and gender equity has also made it into the spotlight. And in December, the Supreme Court insulated a Texas law that bans abortions after the 6th week of pregnancy from judicial review. And of course, we have Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization coming up with a Supreme Court decision expected sometime by late June, which could explicitly overrule Roe v. Wade. If we look at this bigger question of gender equity, how are we doing as society? Are we making forward progress? Are we moving backward? Have we made any progress?
Yeah. I mean, we have made enormous progress. I do have to say to young women, you have no idea how differently you are being raised, what this is social expectations, the fact that you can see women still at far too small numbers, but there are women CEOs and there are women on the Supreme Court and there's a woman vice president. And, there's so many women doctors that my sons for a long time sort of didn't realize men could be doctors. So that is all so different and so much better. And indeed, now what happens is young women just assume everything's equal until they have children. And then they suddenly realize, no, actually, there are all these expectations here about what I should do and who I am, and people telling me I don't want that promotion because don't want to travel. Nobody says to a man who becomes a father, you don't want a promotion. Quite the contrary. They say you should have a promotion. Now you're supporting a family. So there's still hugely gendered expectations, but there has been a huge amount of progress. The abortion question, and just in general, the other ways in which really, frankly, a lot of the Trump administration's policies for me were really misogynistic. And I don't like that word because I don't think people hate women, but they were. That is partly just backlash, right? So you see the same thing with racial equity, where you elected Barack Obama, and then you have this surging backlash that takes you in some cases backward. The other problem, though, is, again, this is a class issue as much as a gender issue. Women have led a lot of the anti-abortion movement. Women, not just men, women who felt like this was wrong, and of course, there are religious beliefs in there too. And what's happening, of course, wealthy women sort of always were able to go somewhere. They used to go to Switzerland and have babies and have them adopted to take care of it. It's poorer women who already may have more kids than they want, who now are forced to have children. And I think we need to frame it as a general equity issue and a privacy issue. I actually do think also, though, I like the Clinton formulation that it was safe, legal, and rare. I don't want a society, none of us do, where people just, have abortions because they didn't take care. So I do think we're going backwards there. I think there's no question that a society in which women cannot control their bodies is worse. But I again think there's a lot of the ways we have to rethink about how we frame this issue that probably will help us make a lot of progress on the state level and then maybe again at the national level.
So speaking of that, how do we elevate this concept of having this humanistic lens on all the decisions we make from a government perspective, including foreign policy, national security, international relations? How do we elevate it nationally and also introduce it into the international context and create a coalition of the willing?
Yes, and it'd be a coalition of lots and lots of women, but also many, many men who I think really push or who chafe under the restraints of a kind of traditional, very traditional male competitive world. So I think the first thing we do is imagine what the world would look like if power were truly representative. So it doesn't mean you substitute all men with women. It just means imagine if women were 50% in every room. And then I would go further than that in terms of women of color and sort of everyone. But we so often still treat all these issues as women's issues, as off here. No, they're human issues. We are half the human race. And again, the things that we have traditionally brought to the table are things that many men feel as well, just as we have whole sides of ourselves that are much more masculine. And again, these are traditional. So we stop thinking that this is this kind of special area and we start thinking, okay, what happens if we make policy for whole human beings at home? So we make policy for human beings who need to compete and who need to care, who need to strive and thrive, and who need to belong and connect. So we just assume that's what a whole human being is, not these, homo economicus, economic man, all that stuff. And then we think, okay, so that person, we want them to have a great job. We want them to great education, good healthcare. We want them to be able to achieve their dreams. And we want them to have strong families, however they're constructed, right? We want them to be able to connect to others, invest in others, be cared for in their turn. Though that suite of policies, and if we did that, we would spend less on our army. I mean, we've got plenty of money, and I believe in a strong defense, but it is wildly skewed. And then when we thought globally, again, of course, we'd make sure that we had whatever we needed to defend against attack. But believe me, with nuclear weapons and cyber war, we can do that. And then we think about, well, what do we do to ensure that other countries can provide these conditions? This is a big part of the migration crisis, right? Is that other countries cannot provide that for their people. We would again think about every issue, and I sort of can go through a whole set of issues, which I won't do here, but it's a process of looking through two lenses at once. We've been way skewed to one part of human nature, and we need to have whole human nature. And I don't believe that all women are nurturing and all men are competitive. We're watching the Olympics. That's for sure not true. But I do believe that all of us as human beings have these different parts of ourselves, and that policy, whether it's national or global, that takes account of that is policy that will ultimately allow us to flourish. It helps for peace and prosperity and saving the planet.
And Marie, that's absolutely incredible. And it gives a hope and a true north to shoot for as we think about the world today and the world that we want it to be. And this was amazing. I can't imagine a better conversation to kick off the summit for International Women's Day. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're so welcome. And I really enjoyed the conversation.
Throughout today's International Women's Day Summit, you'll hear messages from leaders sharing their hopes and desires for a better future for women. Our hope is to inspire and unite. Here is our first My Vision, with a very special thank you to Bank of America. Presenting her vision for women's solidarity, please welcome Sharon Stone.
My hope is that by Women's International Day next year, that women are treated with parity at such a level that it's no longer how are women treated, are women being paid equally, are women being treated fairly, but are we a team? Are we a team? And in that team, is everyone on the team the same? Are we all giving equally? Are we all sharing equally? Are we all enjoying it equally? Is this a team sport? So by next International Women's Day, I would really hope that we're a team in this world and that this world as a whole becomes a team sport. Happy International Women's Day.
On the front lines of some of the most urgent humanitarian crises facing our planet, women peace builders are working to protect their communities from threats ranging from political conflicts to climate change, human rights violations to the COVID-19 response, and more. Research shows that despite the critical role female leaders play in affecting change, their participation remains minimal. In response, the United Nations established the Women's Peace and Humanitarian Fund to provide desperately needed support for grassroots activists working to respond to crises and build lasting peace. Their latest campaign will support 1,000 women leaders in crisis-affected areas by 2025. To discuss this critical initiative, please welcome Thrive Global's Ariana Huffington, who's joined by the United Nations Global Advocate Kristen Bell and the United Nations Head of the Secretariat for the Women's Peace and Humanitarian Fund, Rita El-Chiari. The conversation will be led by the Executive Director of our presenting partner organization, Sarah Hackey-Bird of Women Moving Millions.
It is such a privilege to facilitate our next conversation on something I'm very personally passionate about, the power of women as peace builders. My name is Sarah Hackey-Bird, Executive Director of Women Moving Millions. Thank you for joining us. We are absolutely thrilled to have with us today Kristen Bell, Actor and Global Advocate for UN Women's Peace and Humanitarian Fund, Ariana Huffington, founder and CEO of Thrive Global, and Rita El-Chiari, the head of the Secretariat for the Women's Peace and Humanitarian Fund. Kristen, let's start with you first. You've been the global advocate for the fund for a number of years. Tell us what drove you to get behind this effort and why the involvement of women leaders in creating and sustaining peace matters, not just to women, but to everyone.
Well, I think I have always been a fan of the underdog. And the women's nonprofits that the funds work with have historically been seen as too small or too insignificant to drive change, which is totally incorrect. It's actually the smartest thing to be funding what they're doing. So because they've been underfunded and undersupported, they had really had to fight to get a seat at the table, even though they are the ones on the ground working hard every day to prevent conflict and provide humanitarian aid to help other women get jobs and stand up when people's human rights are being threatened. And that doesn't just benefit women, it benefits everyone. Everyone's safety, it benefits the economy for each individual place. So we shouldn't be dismissing these women. We should be putting them in charge. And that is what the Women's Peace and Humanitarian Fund is doing every single day. I also very much believe in the power of grassroots change. I think the best changes come from the ground up, and certainly the longest lasting changes. So to provide these women the ability to be change makers, the fact that the Women's Peace and Humanitarian Fund was focusing on the grassroots, the people on the ground, that's why I wanted to get involved in the fund.
Amazing. Thank you. Ariana, I'm going to go over to you next. As it pertains to today's conversation, one could say that the well-being of a nation depends on how it values and engages its most valuable employee and resource, women. What can we do to raise the consciousness around the need to stand with women who hold our communities together locally and globally?
Thank you, Sarah. Well, there are really two things that I have seen again and again that apply to our conversation today. The first is that real fundamental change happens through micro steps. That's why I love what Kristen said about it starting with the grassroots. Sometimes you look at the problems and they're so overwhelming that you may feel, well, there is nothing we can really do to solve them at scale. But what we found about behavior change, working with companies all around the world and their employees, is that big behavior changes start with tiny, incremental, daily micro steps that cumulatively become fundamental transformational changes. So if we can apply the same concept, we see that any time we have an impact on one life, it has ripple effects all around the community. And the other thing is that we are seeing that a lot of the qualities that have been seen as female qualities, like empathy, collaboration, are now fundamental. We now see a lot of CEOs who probably in the past would have been bragging about how little sleep they got, bragging about how empathetic they are. These have been stereotyped as male and female. We know we have women manifesting all qualities and many men who are empathetic and collaborative, but these traditionally female qualities that have been normally undervalued are now at the forefront, and they're, of course, at the forefront of any peacemaking efforts. And that's why women are more important than ever in these undertakings.
And Rita, I want to bring you in because the fund recognizes this. Everything that you do is rooted just in everything that Ariana had just said about women being offering, I think, this valuable untapped resource for communities and just really the lifeblood. So tell us a little bit more about the fund, what you're doing to support women nonprofits locally, human rights defenders on the front lines, why the UN launched this effort, and what you hope to achieve.
Yes, thank you very much, Sarah. This is a very important question. And we're seeing today globally, the number of conflicts and humanitarian crises is the highest since World War II. And the international community and the United Nations as well in particular has looked into what could be done better to respond to these rising conflicts. And the thing that we have collectively identified as the missing brick of our collective action was really the involvement of women. So in the past, the way we were looking at conflict and crisis was to say, okay, women are victims of rape oftentimes during conflicts and humanitarian crisis. They are targeted, they are killed, they are victims of violence, and this needs to be addressed. But we also need to shift the narrative and also look at women as actors, not only as passive victims, but also as stakeholders, as empowered responders to the crisis that we're seeing around the world. And this is really the kind of untapped potential that the international community has identified in responding to this crisis, and is really to invest in women. Women in crisis are really powerful vehicles of resilience, of agency, of action, and they play critical roles as first responders, as peace builders in these settings.
Kristen, what happens when women leaders have the resources they need to transform their communities and this vision of what Rita had talked about is realized? What could our world look like?
Oh, wow. I mean, a big smile comes across my face thinking about that because, yeah, I mean, there's only, I think it was Desmond Tutu who said there's only so many people you can rescue who have fallen into a river before you need to look upstream and see what's pushing them in. And the reality is the people on the ground, like these women that the WPHF is supporting, are the ones who are seeing the conflict, who actually not only have the information that we need to solve these problems, but have the, for lack of a better gendered term, manpower, because they're on the ground. It is really the idea of going with the people who are experiencing the pain. Often people that are in power are the furthest people from the pain, right? And it doesn't make any difference. But the idea of shifting our consciousness to helping the people on the ground help other people on the ground could transform the entire globe. There's also been numerous studies that have been done where when people are empowered, they make better decisions, they're happier. I mean, this is all like tiny tributaries of good ripple effects when you're not just handing out aid. Like, here, I'm a person in power and I'm trying to solve this for you. That's archaic. It doesn't work very well anymore, only in specific situations. But like, for example, there's a woman that we support. Her name is Robina, and she has a nonprofit in Uganda. And the reason that she is funded and the reason that she is so qualified is because she has the experience. You talk about when you want to hire someone, as Ariana knows, you want someone with experience. Well, these are the hires, right? Because Robina, when she was a young girl, she was walking to school 3 miles there, 3 miles back, had no shoes. So she has a ton of endurance and could barely afford it, almost quit school, and then at age 25 had to flee Uganda with 2 very small children. And she understands personally the devastating impact of conflict on women and families. So her knowledge is incomparable to anything we could come in and say we think this community needs. She is the best person to fix the problem. And when you find the best person to fix the problem, you don't hire a plumber to do your electricity or an electrician to do your plumbing. You want the best person to fix the problem. So we could be looking at grassroots effects rippling up and changing entire communities so that, in 10 years, we actually see, oh, wow, these numbers of conflict are declining all over. And it's because we chose to systematically fund the women who knew exactly what was going on and be able to transform their own lives and the lives of the communities around them. And what Gita was saying, that the fund has supported over 450 women-led and women-run nonprofits in 26 different countries. It sounds incredible, and then you realize that's affected 10 million people. That's not a small amount of people anymore, right? Now we've affected 10 million people that have not only received aid when necessary so that they can better support their communities, their own economy, but also have been infused with this idea of, oh, someone helped me. There's this pay it forward sentiment. And I think that could provide some real electricity to the healing of the conflicts of the world. It's pretty incredible.
I think this is so important. I think Kristen brought it to life by mentioning one particular woman and her story, and suddenly touched our hearts. And we went from these monumental problems that, oh my God, how can we possibly solve, to one particular woman and how the ripple effects of supporting her are having an impact on her community and beyond. So I think that's really why I love this organization, because it is so specific and targeted. And then the storytelling comes in. And capturing the stories is key, because we never know who is going to read this particular story and be inspired and feel empowered to get involved themselves.
Ariana, how do we get to the place where governments, businesses, society more commonly embrace the value of women leaders? How do we get to that point? Why are we still here today in 2022? How do we push through this seemingly intractable barrier to understanding what you're talking about?
Well, I love the power of telling the stories again and again. Having spent a lifetime in the media, there is a tendency in the media to focus on what is not working. They call it, if it bleeds, it leads. So changing that, and there are efforts, towards solutions journalism, to actually capture the stories. And now, of course, that we've democratized media, they don't have to be in the New York Times. They can be in our blogs, on our social media. We all are media now. So I think doing a better job telling the stories. I mean, I would love maybe just those of us here and those listening. If Kristen writes something about the woman in Uganda, we can all amplify the message and cross-post it, and vice versa. We can all come up with the stories, capture them, share them. And what I love is kind of the magic of not knowing who is going to read them, be touched by them, and begin to take these micro steps towards change.
Ariana, I think what you said, it's striking a nerve in me, because it's sort of, when I do any of this work that I'm lucky to be involved in, I feel this electricity in my body because of the power of amplification. And so often, again, the people in power who are furthest from the pain felt, well, we should provide a solution. And it felt like it wasn't working. It hasn't worked when people step in and say, here's what I think you need. And now that we have all this data and we have genuine studies that prove that, we actually just have to empower the people on the ground. We have to go in with questions. What do you need?
Yes.
How can I help you? You see this problem clearly. You have all the information that we need to help solve this problem. It's our job. I hope that people have a takeaway from watching this to know that our job now is the amplification, because we know that when women are included in negotiating peace agreements are 35% more likely to last 15 years or longer. So we're basing this on facts and the data. And I want to live in a world where women are respected, where their human rights are protected, and where we treat them as equals with all the knowledge to solve these problems. And that means that my job is no longer attempting to solve. My job description is now to capture the stories and amplify.
And to your point, Kristen and Ariana, I think for us, for the Women's Peace and Humanitarian Fund, it's exactly what we're trying to do. So we're a demand-driven funding mechanism, which means that we don't tell people what to do. We just tell them, this is what we can help you with. Now tell us what to do. Tell us what you want to do. Tell us what your solutions are. And then we get behind them with funding, of course, but also with amplification and with support to make their organizations stronger. We're not by any means trying to tell them what to do. They know better. We're just helping them to be able to do their work better. And actually, the amplification piece has been also really key for us, because what we have realized as well when we started this work is that this women's work is really unknown. It's very, very, very little known. And we really need to, document those stories and to get them out and to involve a little bit more people than just the people who are within the United Nations or the governments that are supporting us, but really to get them to the general public so that they know what these women are doing. So
this is so inspiring. I want to stick with the conversation around amplification and storytelling for a moment, because I think it's so powerful. And I can only imagine, Kristen, the brave and inspiring women you've met since you've joined this role and what you've learned along this journey. What are some of the stories and or lessons that have stayed with you from the women that you've met?
Some of the lessons that I learn are harder for me to articulate because they're very emotional lessons. Just sitting at a table with women who are sharing more about, they share some details of their story, but their focus is completely on their solutions. And their head is held high, even though they've said some details that as a white American girl, I would find scary. Like, you have to walk to school 3 miles without shoes and no one packs you a lunch. Like all these things that based on my upbringing should feel scary, they say with such dignity and how it's shaped them. And then they explain the problems within their community. And they do it with what we call, my daughter takes jujitsu classes, and in jujitsu, they call it the posture of the champion, where you tie a string to your heart and you lift it to the sky. And you just say everything very clearly and concisely. So sitting next to these women, I suppose an emotional lesson, which is it's difficult to articulate, was that yeah, it did right size a lot of my problems and realize that resilience and anti-fragility is incredibly powerful. And don't to not succumb to the pity I could feel for myself on any given day. And that's not to say that, you know, within the conversation of self-care, you can't have complaints, but it's just the framework, right? I'm allowed to have complaints, but the keeping myself exposed to people that have had a much more difficult time than I have had keeps me very grounded.
I love right size my problems. I'm going to use that.
That's what I say about when my children were born. They say, "What's it like the moment your child is born?" And I say, it immediately right sizes all of your problems because you have someone else to care for. So I guess the other thing that I was learned is that the dignity in requesting help is very powerful because, you know, a lot of times the Women's Peace and Humanitarian Fund is asking for the women to come forward, and sometimes they come to us, but just the dignity of requesting help can change your life and someone else's. Like we said, it is truly a win-win. So every time the fund is able to help a woman, she's helped, her community is helped, and we get more self-esteem. It's a pretty incredible it's a pretty incredible system.
Let's talk a little bit about resilience because it keeps coming up. And we know that women experience conflict differently. Rita, could you talk to us a little bit about how conflict and crisis, war is impacting women and girls in a unique way?
Of course. So obviously, crisis and conflict is hard for everyone. So the purpose here is really not to kind of, say that men are not experiencing conflict either, or that boys are not. But women and girls are really having, leaving things very differently. I was mentioning earlier, and that's where the kind of action started, was really through the kind of angle of sexual violence against women and girls in conflict. You know that the bodies of women and girls have been used as tools of war. And that has been since war exists, that we have used rape as a retaliation measures against the other group that we are fighting, right? So women and girls' bodies have always been at the heart and the center of war. So that's really kind of the first thing that when the international community was looking at how war and conflict and crisis are different for women and girls, this is the first thing that they're looking at. But beyond that, obviously, there are other lived experiences that are different from women and girls. Usually, women are responsible for their families, not only their children, but also more globally their dependents. Sometimes it's brothers and sisters, it's older parents. So when they are fleeing a situation of conflict, then they are the ones who have to take care of their dependents. When the Afghanistan crisis hit in August, this was something that was also at the heart of our action, is how do we make sure that the women that we support evacuate Kabul or evacuate Afghanistan, that we support also their dependents, because this is something that is really specific to women. Men sometimes agree, maybe it's difficult for them. I'm not saying it's not difficult, but they agree more easily to leave their families and to be able to come back to them at a later stage. For women, it's impossible to evacuate a city or a country and leaving their dependents behind. And we actually launched a new campaign last year that's called the 1000 Women Leaders campaign, which aims at supporting 1000 women leaders and their organizations by the end of 2025. And it's really about what we just mentioned today, about amplifying their voices, spreading their stories and their needs, but also to try to find a space for everyone to get involved. From the United Nations to the governments, to the individuals, to the private sector, to the business, to the media, for everybody to be able to help and to do something about it.
Right. This idea, this mindset shift that I was talking about earlier, about moving into situations with a level of humility and what is required to build trust. with people who are more proximate to the issues that they're trying to solve, and then to give them the agency to know how to solve it. I think that is beautiful. It is radical. It is absolutely what I think of when I think of a gender equal world. And thank you all for joining today, sharing your stories, your insights, your perspectives. It truly was such a privilege and a gift. Thank you.
Thank you.
Today, we invite you to join our call to action. Visionary Women has created a special fund to support the Women's Peace and Humanitarian Fund, and we're kicking off the effort with a $25,000 donation. To join us, please visit visionarywomen.com/donate. No contribution is too small, and 100% of the proceeds will benefit the Women's Peace and Humanitarian Fund. Thank you for your support. Presenting her vision for women's rights, please welcome Ruchira Gupta.
Namaste. I'm Ruchira Gupta. I am the founder of Apne Aap, an Indian anti-sex trafficking organization. I'm also an Emmy-winning journalist and a feminist campaigner. My dream is for a world in which no girl or woman is bought or sold. My NGO Apne Aap works to end sex trafficking in the brothels and red light areas of Calcutta. From India, from Ruchira, and from all the women and girls of Apne Aap. Happy International Women's Day. Namaste.
Coming up on the 2022 International Women's Day Summit, supermodel Cindy Crawford keeps it real in the authentic entrepreneur. The Visionary Award will be handed out to a female leader that has contributed to the economic empowerment of women. And Yale professor Dr. Laurie Santos is here to discuss the science of happiness. It's the International Women's Day Summit, sponsored by Chara Schreier and the Kadima Foundation. Now we continue our summit with another My Vision and a very special message from Maria Shriver.
Happy International Women's Day. My vision for women today is that every single woman, no matter where she is, has the ability to achieve whatever her dreams are for her. That's my hope. My vision has been to try to find a cure for Alzheimer's because 2/3 of those affected by Alzheimer's are women, and particularly women of color. I've spent the last 20 years trying to understand why that is and trying to educate women about their brain health, their physical health, their emotional, spiritual, and cognitive health. I hope to make a difference in women's health trajectory so that women can live long lives, healthy lives, so that they can be around long enough to see their grandchildren, know their grandchildren, love their grandchildren. I'm trying to make a difference in that space, and I'm so encouraged that I get to work with so many women who have their own dreams of making a difference, their own passions. That is my hope, is that every woman finds her own passion and that she has the support system to help her achieve her dreams. We deserve that. You deserve that. Happy International Women's Day.
When Grey's Anatomy premiered in 2005, Ellen Pompeo's wildly popular portrayal of Meredith Grey was a critical part of the show's success. So it was no surprise when she negotiated a deal that made her one of the highest paid actresses in television history. But what did surprise a lot of people was how she stood up, at risk to herself, and spoke out publicly about her fight to be paid equally to her male counterpart. Since then, Ellen has become known as a fierce advocate for pay equity for all women, and has used her platform to draw attention to the gender and racial inequality facing workers across the nation. Today, she joins entertainment lawyer Nina Shah, a founding member of Time's Up, to talk about pressing for change in industries ranging from entertainment to nursing to farming. This is Closing the Gap.
Ellen, this is such a pleasure. Like many in our industry, and I think probably many women in the country, I was so proud of you and so enthralled when you started to talk about money. It was such a pleasure to see someone in your position use your platform to talk about issues that impact women across this country and in fact in the world at large. So kudos to you.
Thank you, Nina. It's a pleasure to meet you. We've never met before, so this is a real honor for me. As an entertainment attorney, you definitely fight for your female clients. So thanks for those kind words. It's I think I'd also be remiss if I don't mention that sitting here as a white woman, being paid the way I am, I have the privilege to be able to open my mouth and speak about it. And so I'm acknowledging my privilege there just from the start, because I think that's part of the work that we have to do.
It's so funny because we're on this panel or this discussion where we're talking about gender pay disparity. And I think the title of our discussion here refers to the 82 cents on the dollar that women make, with working women make on average. But it also, I know some of this was in our back and forth as we were preparing for this. It's also about what women across the spectrum make. And so I always like to start off by reminding our audience that 82 cents is an average. And in fact, women at the lower end of the spectrum, which is always women of color, particularly Latinas, African American women, indigenous women, all make a lot less. Sometimes in the case, I think the statistic with respect to Latinas is almost 50 cents on the dollar. So another way of looking at it is that if you are the average Latino woman, it takes you 2 years to make what a non-Hispanic white man makes. And that's that has been a problem for much of the working life of women in society, in our society. It has always been there, and it unfortunately doesn't seem to be moving as quickly in the right direction as we would like. Can you mind talking a little bit about your own experience of talking about money and how that impacted your life and your place in this movement? And I sincerely see you as a person who's part of this movement to advance women.
Thank you. I will say that, I didn't get here obviously alone. I have a female attorney and I have a female boss. The truth is it's a complicated position I find myself in with respect to the reactions to me speaking about this, about money publicly. And it's complicated for many different reasons. But I think, from where I sit, what's interesting to me is the different reactions I get from, I get, and I'm often labeled outspoken. And then on top of that, I also get told really often, don't speak about money, by women and men. Don't speak about your salary specifically, with regards to the show, because that can, that can complicate things. But it runs the gamut. It's not just like I speak about money or I speak about my pay or I think I'm probably safer when I speak about women being paid in the workplace in more general terms. When it's more personally about my situation, I think that gets a little more uncomfortable for people. And then I can suffer some backlash for that. And I have to be very careful about what I say. I was sort of allowed to do it. I had support, which was really key. It's a tricky situation I find myself in talking about my pay scale for a lot of different reasons. But one of them that I mention all the time is that I have a very concrete number that I can attach to Grey's Anatomy. I can see very specifically how much ad revenue or how much the show Grey's Anatomy generates for the Walt Disney Company. So then, my team can go in and base my value off of what they know is generated. Most people don't have that advantage, right? That's a little trickier.
I often felt that I got a much greater pushback when I was aggressive on behalf of women. When I was aggressive on behalf of men, it wasn't said as much, but there was a real feeling there that I was doing a good job. But when I was aggressive on behalf of women, I sometimes heard things like, might be getting a little ahead of yourself there. Or she might be getting a little ahead of herself. Or that's a big number. There are things, and these are things said by people on the other side who are for the most part good people, but who are so ingrained in the system of how to value people's worth, that it didn't occur to them that they might have been reacting differently on a gendered basis. So that's been my experience. I don't know if that.
No, I mean, and that's so interesting, right? Because gender norms and gender biases have been ingrained in us they start ingraining gender biases and gender norms when we start listening to fairy tales when we're 2 and 3 years old. The story of Cinderella. I have a podcast called Tell Me, and yesterday I interviewed this hilarious best friends that wrote this book called Cinderella, You Bitch. And the whole book is about how fairy tales at the beginning of our lives, these fairy tales that we're introduced to, introduce us to these gender norms that are then in our subconscious. Cinderella had to be, rescued by a man. And of course, he was so dumb, he couldn't even find her by her face. He could only identify her by her shoe. It's let's Sleeping Beauty, let's kiss a woman who's asleep. I mean, how creepy is that? Right. So the gender norms and the gender biases have been ingrained in our constitution from when we're small. And so our work really, I think, is as a practice, is to every day recognize where we ourselves fall short and where we're falling into our own biases about ourselves, and make sure that we are doing the work so that we can show up and advocate for ourselves. Not just because we've been told to do it or because we see someone else doing it, but we truly understand our worth and feel confident when we're asking for what we're asking for, which again, you point out, we're very lucky that we have advocates. Most women in the workplace do not have advocates. One area that is I'm very passionate about, and that I follow people doing the work in this field, are farm workers. These women and men, for the most part, are in California, the state of California, are Mexican immigrants for the most part, who sometimes travel across the border to get day work, picking our vegetables that our grocery stores are then going to, charge us, $19 for a little basket of Brussels sprouts that someone has stood in a field in the heat, in the rain, or the sleet, inhaling pesticides, in absolutely no conditions that anyone wants to stand in for a 12-hour day and pick vegetables, and they're paid, pennies and not compensated, and they have very little advocacy. So I think about those people. So I think it's important. Perspective is important. And to tie it back to how we started the conversation with acknowledging our privilege, right? There's privilege on all levels. We can always find someone who has a more challenging situation than us. And I think those farm workers are at the very bottom of who's thinking about them, so there's levels to this.
Yeah. And I think part of what you're saying also that's so important, Ellen, is that it's the solidarity that we all have to have with each other. There's this thing in our society that's kind of this zero-sum thinking. Every time I gain, somebody else gains something, they're taking something away from me. And that's just not true. It's a fiction that's been fed to us by people who are otherwise very successful in their own right. And they're certainly not worried that they're taking away from someone else in their success. And I think the more we understand that we stand with all working women, and even if our own particular situations are secure, they're not secure because our sisters are not secure. And if there's one thing I would love for us to recognize is the interrelationship that we all have, but which isn't, I think, talked about enough and recognized enough. So you're pointing it out is a really important thing, because there's a continuum of working women in this country, and no matter where you fall on that continuum, you are linked to everyone else. So thank you.
Yeah, it's such an important point, Nina. It really is that we are all connected. We are truly all connected, and that is a destructive mindset to believe you're deconstructing any work that's actually been done to believe that because someone else is getting something that we are getting less of that. You could apply that to many situations. To believe that you have the power, just you singularly do have the power to help, because you're going to inspire someone else to speak up, and you're going to inspire someone else to, help someone else. And it's challenging work. It's not like it just happens overnight. I mean, I'm consistently asked to speak about money, and I'm consistently asked to not speak about money. I can speak about money in general, and then but I can't speak specifically about, I'm asked to not speak about money with specifics to my situation. It's a delicate balance.
Oh, that's so absurd though, because transparency is what we need. We need it so desperately. And not only is it the interrelationship, in the ecosystem, but look at what COVID has done to working women. Why do we lose a generation of progress in a 2-year period? And unless we all put our all of us, and that includes men, all of us put our shoulder, forward, that we really get in there and fight, we have got to make that progress back. And there are so many things that people don't realize are interrelated. I think the sociologist, it was a quote I got that I loved. It says, other countries have social safety nets. I want to attribute this correctly. The US has women. And Jessica Calarco, a sociologist, said that. So because, we run into a health problem, a public health problem, that all of a sudden your children can't be in school, or they can't be in daycare, or daycares can't open because people who operate them are ill or otherwise restricted, then all of a sudden women's progress in the workplace is just so negatively impacted. And I think what we all have to do over these next couple of years is really advocate for child care support for working parents. I mean, working mothers, and particularly working mothers of color, are really out there on their own for the most part. Their children are sick. They have to take off from work. They tend to have jobs where they have to be there in person. All of these things then lead to them making less money. And the last thing I'll say about this making less money, because a lot of people see 82 cents on the dollar and they think, oh my goodness, we're getting close. We're not getting close, guys, because what that means is that you get less Social Security payments into your account, which means when you go to draw in your account in retirement, there is less money paid out to you. So now you go from being a less advantaged working person to a poor retired person. So this affects along the continuum of your life. So those years when you couldn't work because you were looking after your little ones, and I know you appreciate this as a mom, are years that will actually impact those children, because they will be working in part to help take care of you, because you didn't have the ability to put aside the money in a retirement sense, which is one thing, but also the government didn't match you at the highest levels because you weren't making money at the highest levels. So it's this vicious circle that we've got to stop.
I agree with you. I think that, government giving more federal funding, or giving the states more money for childcare is really something we should all be trying to work to figure out how we can take part in those discussions, how we can show up better to support the women fighting for that legislation, who's writing that legislation. That's something that I don't know. I couldn't tell you right now who's writing childcare legislation. That's another area that I'm seeing now that I could be possibly involved in, and make advances in that respect. Over COVID, there was something really interesting that happened in healthcare. And I have obviously an affinity for the healthcare, our healthcare community. And what we saw in healthcare through COVID is in the nursing sector, we saw, and we know that nurses are underpaid and overworked. And before COVID, this was true. And then, during COVID, it was just absolutely abhorrent, the conditions that nurses were meant to work under. Nurses were not, and this isn't specific to women, obviously there's plenty of amazing male nurses, but nurses were not given COVID tests. There was absolutely no regard for nurses' well-being at all. They didn't care if you were a nurse with COVID. They did not care if you showed up for your shift with COVID. Just show up for your shift. They didn't care that you had to wear the same N95 mask all day long, or 2 days or 3 days or 4 days. There were absolutely no protections. So if we go back to legislation again, and speaking about legislation, and I don't know, this is another area that I'm not so educated about, is the legislative piece. But where is the legislation to impose upon these private sector and these privately owned hospitals that there has to be protections, not just wage protections, but health protections for these workers? Because what happened to nurses, and the nurses got smart, and the nurses figured out, oh, we can be travel nurses. And the nurses just started quitting in droves. And they just said, we are not putting up with this anymore. And so now hospitals are having to contend with travel nursing. And travel nurses come and go. They're on a contract. And if you're a hospital and you don't have any shift nurses because they've all walked out on you, well, now you have to hire travel nurses. So now your cost just went up.
Yes, at a higher
Because,
rate.
it's like, to not do the right thing across the board, for corporations to not do the right thing across the board in the first place, in the end, you're going to cost yourself more money. In the end, you're going to have to make a correction in some way, because when you lose women, you lose. But the truth is who's paying them now ends up paying much more. So it's more cost effective to do the right thing from the start. And then you have more productivity, you have happier workers. So your outcomes are better, especially when we're talking about hospitals, when we're talking about life or death here. Do you really want angry, tired, unwell nurses taking care of your patients? Your outcome numbers are going to be terrible, and your hospital is going to get a terrible accreditation or rating because your outcomes are poor. So it's the same way when companies do better when they're just naturally inclusive, right? You get a better lens on what's happening. Who are our customers? If you only have white men working on your board, or whether it's your school board, whether it's your company board, you're only getting the lens of what white men see. By being more inclusive and fairer, you're getting all kinds of different opinions that make outcomes better. I mean, basically what this, you could break this down. Women have to advocate for themselves, but corporations and CEOs have to understand that really your profits will go up if you're just structuring things fairly and equally. Your end result is going to be better, for sure, I believe.
Oh, not only do you believe it, but studies have proven this to be true. But when you raise the issue of nursing, which I know you have a special, proclivity for, it's interesting because nursing has often been for women the profession that elevates them into the middle class. Historically, my grandmother was a nurse. In fact, my mother was the only woman of her generation in our family who wasn't a nurse. So because nursing was the thing that catapulted us firmly into the middle class, notwithstanding the fact that they were all well-educated people. And so the question I would ask is, in those years when those unionized nurses are asking for these kinds of protections and these kinds of pay increases, why aren't they being supported? There's such a big anti-union movement in the country now, but when the truth is that unions have really been at the heart of people making these huge gaps and leaps. And I don't know how much of this you followed. I've only, like you, I only have a bit of knowledge about it. But one of the things I noticed in the state of California is nursing schools became more often um, uh, profit run by for-profit companies than by, the public education sector. That was a shift that happened. And so all of a sudden, this profession that is a profession that is dominated by women and that catapults women into the middle class now costs women a lot more to get into. And they're saddled with, greater loan repayment. So everything, I think it goes back to what we were talking about. How do we get past the gender inequities, pay inequities, by looking at the system as a whole and supporting people all along the way? We support the moms and the other working parents. We support women who are trying to gain an education so that they can get a better job. When they have those better jobs, we pay them on an equal basis, and we support them when they ask for a wage that is commensurate with what they are contributing. And all of these things are linked one to another, but we've always been in a place where, even in legislation, I mean, I don't know if you're aware of this, Ellen, but that we have been trying to make women, we've been trying to get rid of the gender disparity since 1963 from a legislative standpoint. How absurd is that? And I just...
It's absurd. And in this particular moment in time, I think it's really frustrating because we see how many things are getting dialed back across the board, from voting rights to women's rights. Right now, we're in a period of despair and regression. And I'm not going to say I'm not sure how we got here. I know exactly how we got here. People losing their grip and being terrified that they're losing their grip. And what I will say is, we see inequities across for anybody watching this, for any women watching this. The truth is like we said, this exists in all fields, right? Look at the numbers of women in tech. Up in Northern California, in STEM and tech and science, the numbers for women are just lower. So what we need to do is we need to go back to our little, obviously we want to fix things now, and we want to make progress now for the younger generations. But what we really need to do as mothers and as caregivers and as mentors is make sure that these young women know, and these young men also, I'm not going to be biased about that, young people, we need to make young people aware that we need to erase these gender norms, that's work they need to start doing 5 years old. If I'm gonna let my kids watch a fairy tale, Cinderella, I'm gonna make sure I'm right there to point out what is wrong with that story. I'm gonna get my pen and my long legal pad and start jotting down all of the list of things that's wrong with this storytelling. And then maybe let's do an exercise where we retell Cinderella. We have to break down the origins of these gender norms that are the foundation that have created all these problems. So we have to attack it from all different angles, I think.
Well, I want to say, I was actually there, Ellen, the night that you and Shonda were at the InStyle Awards. And you talked, and Shonda in particular, talked about these issues. One of the things that struck me again is Shonda saying, I'm going to stand here and I'm going to be bold and proud, and I'm going to talk about myself in ways that I'm not necessarily comfortable in doing so. So I think one of the things that I would love to leave our audience with is this notion that stand up for yourself. It isn't always easy, but in doing so, sometimes there's just this unintended consequence that even if you don't get the money, you get the confidence. And I could almost watch that evening. I was kind of watching, and Shonda, who was of course, already in charge, but I kind of looked at her kind of grow in her confidence in that moment. And I've watched you over the years talk about these issues, and thank you for continuing to talk about them even when people don't want you to, because you've shown all of us how important it is. So I say we have to put these issues out front, we have to be transparent about it, and we have to stand in solidarity with our sisters. And guys out there, you need to stand in solidarity with us because it's important for you ultimately. You know, your life is going to be made easier ultimately by supporting, this notion of equity in a real way. So those are my
really important remarks, because two things that you hit on that are really moving to me is get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that's a phrase we hear across a few different genres, and it's really powerful. Be comfortable being uncomfortable. It's the only way progress happens. And for people watching, empathy, know that it is uncomfortable, and take a breath and hold your judgment and hold your labels, and know that just because a woman is standing up for herself and seems outspoken or confident, know that that isn't easy.
Yeah, and as men, when women speak up, support them. A woman speaking up and asking to be treated fairly isn't an opportunity for you to treat her worse. That is something that, because I can probably hear women saying, I'm afraid to speak up because this person is so horrible. Well, you know what? We've got to train that person to not be horrible. And the training starts now when they're little boys, or it starts at the beginning.
Absolutely. It absolutely does. And for women too, women don't get out of this. We can't expect that all women are just going to naturally support us when we speak up. That's just not the case. We say it is, but it really isn't. So,
well, I know they have your support and they have mine, and we'll just, you know what? We're in it. We're in this good fight forever. I know that. We are. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nina. This was great. So much fun and great to meet you.
Presenting her vision for women's expression, please welcome Paloma Masonette.
I'm really looking forward to seeing women really just be whoever they want to be, whether that's expressing their masculinity, femininity, going after high power careers, or just being a homemaker. Happy International Women's Day.
What is the key to finding happiness? For centuries, man has struggled to find the answer, and today this woman has a pretty good idea. Her name is Dr. Laurie Santos, and she's a professor at Yale University who created a course on the subject called Psychology and the Good Life. It became the most popular class in the school's 319-year history, with 1 in every 4 Yalees signing up to uncover the mysteries of what makes us happy. That led to an explosively popular free online version of the course where over 3.4 million people enrolled in 2020 alone, hoping to learn what Dr. Santos has to say about the pursuit of happiness. Turns out it's pretty simple if you follow the science. Please welcome the host of the Happiness Lab podcast, Dr. Laurie Santos, and Emmy Award-winning journalist Mara Schiavocampo. This is The Science of Happiness, sponsored by Mark Piken.
Laurie, thank you so much for being here. This is a real pleasure.
Thanks so much for having me.
So this is such an important topic because it's something that affects absolutely everyone. So I'll start with an obvious question, but it's actually a lot more complicated than it seems, as your work well demonstrates. What does it mean to be happy?
I mean, I think we could take, many, many hours on that question. I could teach a whole class just on that question alone. But I take a very nerdy approach to thinking about what happiness is. I use the social scientist definition. And most social scientists think of happiness as having 2 parts. It's being happy in your life and with your life. So in your life is like, are you just experiencing positive emotion? Do you have joy? Do you have laughter? Do you have fun? And is the ratio between those positive emotions good relative to the negative emotions? It's not that you have no negative emotions. In fact, I imagine we might even talk about this, but it's just that the ratio is pretty good. That's kind of happy in your life. But happy with your life is different. It's the sense that you're satisfied with your life. There's meaning and purpose in your life, right? And so I like this definition because these 2 parts can sometimes vary, right? Think of when you have a young newborn at home, right? Like the with your life, oh my God, this new baby, so much meaning. But the in your life, it's like dirty diapers and lack of sleep, like they can kind of vary. And then I think you can have it the other way too. Think of the Instagram influencer who has so much, perceived hedonism in their life, right? Like so much sense of they're on vacations and doing this stuff, but with their life, there's a sort of sense of emptiness and so on. And so my take is like, if we can maximize the in your life happiness, you're having lots of positive experiences and emotions, and the with your life happiness, you feel like you're doing something meaningful, then that sort of makes for a real happy life.
Do you need both of those things in equal measure, or is one more important than the other?
I think there's all kinds of times when we have trade-offs on these. I think the newborn baby is a good one, right? It's not going to be, dirty diapers and lack of sleep forever. You just have to get through that period. And I think there's all kinds of times where, we might be struggling with a sense of meaning and then double down on, some of the positive emotions and the fun side, but then we need to get back to things that might feel a little bit more satisfying. But, what we see in a lot of the empirical works is that the strategies that really matter for happiness, the ones that kind of really work, and we find lots of empirical evidence showing, hey, we should be going after those things, they tend to be ones that maximize both. So take something just simple like mindfulness, right? Like this act of being present. This can allow us to notice and experience more positive emotions. You're like tasting your coffee in the morning, or you're present to look at your spouse's smile, right? But it can also allow you to have a little bit more meaning, where you're present and are thinking about the big picture and so on. And so a lot of the practices that really matter for happiness, the ones that researchers like me talk about all the time, those are ones that ideally are going to maximize both of those things at once.
Now, you mentioned something like a good cup of coffee or the smile of a loved one as markers of happiness or things that make you happy. But people tend to think of the grander things as being what will make them happy: having money, having wild success, having the man or woman of their dreams. What are the things that people actually think will make them happy? And what are the things that actually do make people happy?
Yeah, well, they're not one and the same, which is a little bit frustrating. It means we get happiness wrong. But you listed them so nicely, right? Like money, accolades at work, the perfect relationship, the perfect shoes, the perfect body, right? I think there are all these goals we put up there, and we say once we get to those things, we'll be happy. And there are two problems with that. One is we have this notion that researchers call the arrival fallacy. It's kind of the happily ever after fallacy. Like once I get that thing, once I make this amount of money, once I get this promotion, once I find that perfect partner, then I will be happy, in theory, forever and ride off into the sunset. But what the evidence suggests is like happiness kind of takes work. We tend to go back to baseline with happiness. My colleague Nick Epley is fond of saying that happiness is like a leaky tire. Like you're kind of going along, and occasionally you need to pump it back up again. And those kinds of things, accolades, money, and so on, we get used to them much more quickly than we expect. They're not the best ways to pump up our leaky tires. Better things are things that we often don't put in those categories of dreams we have or things that we think will make us happily ever after. They're often like the simple things, getting a little bit of social connection, doing nice things for other people, engaging in different thought patterns, like being more grateful, being more present, simple healthy habits like exercise and sleep. These are the kinds of things that when you dig into the evidence, you find those are the things that matter a lot more. Which is a problem, right? Because it means when we look at our calendars and what we're investing in, when we look at our long-term goals, it's often not like, let me find a lifestyle where I can have more social connection, or let me plan my day so that I'm maximizing the number of random acts of kindness I do. That's not what we're investing in, but that's what's going to do the most work in terms of getting us the well-being boost we're all searching for.
You are speaking to moments of joy, many, many moments of joy. Is that really the basis of happiness, of just a life filled with as many moments of joy as possible?
I think moments of joy, but also moments of real meaning. Think about the act of doing something for someone else, right? This is the kind of thing that gives us joy, not because like we're necessarily getting pleasure, but because we're investing in a social relationship, because we're doing something meaningful and nice for another person. We're doing something moral and good in the world. I think we can kind of get stuck in this idea that happiness is all about the like in your life part, like pure hedonism, like like vacations and bubble baths and unicorns and rainbows, right? But in practice, like happiness sometimes takes challenge. Happiness sometimes takes doing things that are difficult. Happiness sometimes takes navigating and recognizing and allowing your negative emotions. And so, in all these different respects, it's just not what we think it is. And that's a real problem. It's not, so many of the women listening out there, it's not like you're not investing in your happiness. You're probably like going like hardcore girl boss on trying to make your life as good as it can be. The problem is that if we have the wrong intuitions about the things we're supposed to be doing, it means we're putting tons of work in, but we might not be getting the results we think. And often that doesn't cause us to say, well, maybe my whole notion of happiness is wrong. It's not about money and success and so on. It's about these other things. Often we think like, oh, maybe I'm just not doubling down enough. I need to put in more time at work. That salary that I thought was good before, nope, I need to think about getting another job where I can make more money. And so we get in these cycles where we really double down on strategies and good things, good in quotes, things in our lives, but they're not the things that really matter for happiness boosts.
I would love to turn the conversation to women specifically and our path towards happiness. Is the path to happiness different for women as compared to men?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that, the basics that I just mentioned are pretty much the same. I think where women can sometimes go astray is that we often on the path to happiness don't give ourselves much self-compassion, right? When you hear all these things that I've just mentioned, if you're like me, you might be like, all right, tomorrow I'm going to get all the social connection and exercise and sleep and presence, right? We have trouble engaging with these strategies for happiness in a way that involves some like baby steps or not being perfect or recognizing that we're just human and maybe every single thing I mentioned just needs to go on hold, in the midst of the current like COVID pandemic that we're in, for example. And so I think a spot where a lot of women can improve would be engaging in a little bit more self-compassion. Oftentimes we think that the path to success requires being like this horrid drill sergeant in our head where we're like yelling at ourselves and like, how dare, we speak to ourselves in ways that we would never speak to the people close to us, hopefully. And we think we do that not because we're, sadistic. We do that because we think that that's the way to do it, right? Like how else will you achieve your goals? But what the science shows is that speaking to yourself in a self-compassionate way, recognizing you're human, giving yourself some self-kindness, these are not just paths to feeling better, but they're also paths to being more effective in your life, to getting things done that you want to get done. One study that I love shows that people who are more self-compassionate procrastinate less. And the reason makes sense when you think about it. It's like if you're not screaming at yourself in your head, you're not as worried about messing up. And so it's not as scary to start. And so that means you start more often and then you get more stuff done. And so I think this idea of, recognizing your common humanity, giving yourself some grace, these are strategies that so many women should take on if they really want to feel a little happier.
Now, you mentioned the pandemic. The pandemic has taken a mental toll on so many of us, but the studies have shown that women specifically have really suffered when it comes to our happiness and our overall life satisfaction. So one statistic that I find interesting is that one of the greatest groups where we've seen an increase in drinking and problem drinking is among women. And of course, you add to that the anxiety, the stress, the added responsibilities from childcare that were placed on us during the pandemic. And you see this effect on mental health and happiness. Why do you think that women responded to the pandemic in this way? Was it about social interaction? Was it the added childcare burden? What do you think was specific to women in this pandemic that really contributed to our suffering?
Yeah, well, honestly, I mean, I think it was all of the above, right? If this pandemic was built to specifically attack our mental health, or if I was building a pandemic that would specifically attack our mental health, I would mess with our social support systems because we need those, mess with our routines because when you mess with people's routines, that causes all this uncertainty, kind of your fight or flight systems up is like, what's going on? Throw in a whole like bushel of anxiety in there about like, are we going to get sick? Are my kids going to get sick? And, throw the weight a little bit more on childcare in a really uncertain time where work and childcare are mingling together. Like this pandemic was a recipe for unhappiness, and particularly women's unhappiness, to the extent that work-life balance and the childcare balance got really disrupted. I think also another issue with, you mentioned this sort of alcoholism and sort of alcohol rates going up and things. I think this gets back to something else, which is that, we have a hard time when things are tricky, right? We think that there's this idea we should put on a stiff upper lip and just pretend nothing bad is happening. We have trouble giving ourselves grace sometimes. And one of the most surprising results in the field of positive psychology or the field of sort of happiness research is that taking time to allow and engage with your negative emotions rather than avoiding them can be a surprising path to happiness. Why are you drinking? It's like everything's terrible and I just like need to pretend it's not terrible, right? But, if you could sit there and say, I'm annoyed, with my spouse right now, or I'm like upset with the kids, or I'm kind of scared, or like I'm just frustrated that I can't get back to the office, or I'm frustrated that I have to go back to the office. I don't want to be there right now, right? Taking a moment to allow those emotions, recognizing they're happening, just saying, I don't have to love this, but I just have to sit with it. Turns out that that's a path to getting through emotions in ways we don't expect. We often avoid emotions. It feels like we've done something wrong or we want to run away from them. But the science shows that they're good signposts. They're telling us that something's wrong, and we annoy them we avoid them at our peril, right? Like if we just kind of ignore these things, we miss out on the great messages that they're providing us with. So, one strategy, especially if you are on that like avoiding, maybe drinking a little bit more and so on, what if you just allowed those motions? Like they're not going to feel great, but the path to get through them is actually to go through them. You need to really experience them.
It was such a relief to hear you describe the pandemic as the perfect storm, because I really thought there was something wrong with me for falling apart the way that I did, because I tend to think of myself as a strong person. So I'm happy to hear that even an expert on mental health says this was a huge, huge challenge. So then the question is, how do we bounce back from this? What is the path back to happiness as the world starts to return to normal? How do we return to normal?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really starts with giving yourself some grace. When you hear those thoughts going to, I wasn't supposed to, feel frustrated or sad or anxious or whatever it was, I should have done better. These kinds of terms, these very black and white ways of thinking, these shoulds. I often tell my students that they're shoulding all over themselves. Ha ha ha. Right? But like when we hear these kinds of shoulds of what we're supposed to do, that's a moment to give yourself some grace. Nobody made it out of this thing without feeling a little bit scared, sad, frustrated, anxious, upset with themselves, some bad habits creeping in there. We all kind of went through it together, but we all want to believe that we're the one strong one, this unique snowflake that powered through this without being affected. I think the first step to navigating this is to recognize that you're just human. This was an unprecedented pandemic that hit our mental health in all kinds of ways, and it's okay not to be okay. That allowing the non-okayness is a really important first step, because it reduces this kind of drill sergeant mindset, this kind of paranoia that there's something wrong with you. It allows you to say, yeah, none of us are okay, but we can experience that. We can go through it. We can reconnect with other people who are going through it the same way, seek out social support and provide that social support. And really, that's really the path to getting better. It's kind of acknowledging like this wasn't great, but the moment of acknowledging that allows you to now embrace some strategies that might be helpful for feeling a little bit better.
Yeah. When it comes to the messaging of happiness, you made the distinction between what people really think will make them happy versus what actually makes them happy. And those two things are often not aligned. Why do you think the messaging is so wrong? I mean, people by and large believe that money and success and love and beauty and being thin and all those things are going to make them happy. Why is the messaging so wrong?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is, I think, capitalism thrives on getting the message wrong. If we're all kind of content with the delights in our life, people wouldn't sell cars and things like that, right? But so part of it's that, but part of it is that our minds are built wrong. It's not, we might want to blame all the advertisers and the cultural messages, but those kinds of things that we seek out incorrectly, they're there without a lot of those messages. They're the kinds of things kids are picking up very early. They're the kinds of things that we're built to go after. We're kind of built to strive. Evolution and natural selection didn't necessarily build minds that were happy to just like be content and allow the, things to just be the way they are. They wanted us to like get out there and survive and reproduce. And that means that we have minds that are constantly going to be built a little bit more to strive more than we maybe need to. They're going to be minds that are built not to enjoy the stuff, but to focus on the negative things, because you don't need to notice the good taste of your coffee, but you need to notice if there's a tiger sneaking up on you to get you, right? So our minds have this negativity bias. It seems like we're just built not to be as happy as we could. The beauty, though, is that we don't have to be, at the mercy of our evolution. I'm talking with you now with contact lenses on. Biology built me like not to see very far at all, but with the beauty of science and technology, I can do better. And we just need to bring that science and technology to our own happiness. When you know the right evidence-based strategies, you can put them into effect and not be at the mercy of the kind of striving and bad stuff that natural selection built you for.
So very quickly before we go, I want to ask you, do you have one or two happiness hacks, things that when you're feeling low, you've done everything right, you've maybe gone through the difficult emotions, but now you really want to feel a little better, you want to boost your mood? Well, what's your happiness hack, your go-to?
Yeah, well, the go-tos are all great in the sense that we can control our happiness. This is another thing to remember is we think we might just be at the mercy of circumstances, but actually we can train our brains to pay attention to the positive things. We can train our brains to pay attention to things we're grateful for, and doing so can really have significant changes on your well-being. So my two favorite hacks these days are finding delights in the world. There's lots of practices of finding what you're grateful for and so on. I sometimes choose to call them delights, which are just like delightful things out there in the world. You know, these days we're in New England when we're having this conversation. I'm in New England when we're having this conversation and it just snowed, but not that much. And people make like tiny snowmen, just a delight, you know, like the fact that like I just have coffee in my house when I thought I was out that morning, like delight, like these little tiny things seem silly, but they're training your attention and your brain to notice that there are good things out there in the midst of a lot of yucky stuff. And that profound switch in your attention can have a big impact on your well-being. So that's one, is focusing on delights. And the other, which sounds silly but is profound for our physical bodies, is just taking time to breathe. You know, this system that kind of gets all revved up when we're feeling anxious and scared or annoyed with whatever frustrating injustice is going on in the world, that's our fight or flight system, what's called the sympathetic nervous system. And once it's on, it's cranking, right? It's stealing all your body's resources away from resting and digesting, what's known as the parasympathetic nervous system. And there are not many hacks once it gets going, as often, you know, like once you're in that spiral, you're in it. But one hack that is under our conscious control is our breath. Just the act of taking a really deep belly breath, and especially a very slow exhale with your belly breath, activates what's known as the vagus nerve. And that kind of turns on this rest and digest system. Like, it's kind of cool. There's not many hacks into these very unconscious, like automatic systems, but your breath is. So when someone tells you, hey, just take a deep breath, they're not being pedantic. Like, they're tapping into a biological system that allows you to hack how anxious or how queued up you feel. So when I'm sometimes even in between Zoom meetings, I'll take a stop, just do, you know, deep breath and really slow exhale. And even if you're doing this now while you're watching this, you notice how you feel afterwards. It's just like, it's just like a little, you know, I've stepped down a step on feeling as anxious or as kind of like raged up as I might be. And it's just a simple thing, but it's, you know, a quick hack you can do in 2 minutes in the midst of a workday. Definitely a powerful one when the kids are getting annoying. It's like, walk into the other room, deep breath. Again, you have to get away from the like, oh, deep breath. Like, no, deep breath is actually affecting your biology in these really important ways. It's your power over your own system that you otherwise can't control. So those are mine. Noticing some delights. And when it's hard to find the delights and things are feeling tough, take in a deep breath.
I love those. And this conversation was a delight for me, and I'm sure it was for so many others. Lori, thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me.
Presenting her vision for women's safety, please welcome Chara Schreier.
On this International Women's Day 2022, my wish for women is that there will be more attention paid to preventing domestic violence. As we all know, during COVID, domestic violence really increased. My daughter Natalie has just completed an incredible film on the subject. I encourage everyone to see, and so I stayed. It tells a compelling story we all need to be aware of, and something that needs a great deal more attention. Happy International Women's Day.
Visionary women in the Hostetler-Wrigley Foundation bring you the inaugural Visionary Prize. This $100,000 grant will be awarded to a female leader of a nonprofit organization that has contributed to the economic empowerment of women. Here now to continue our celebration of International Women's Day and announce our winner, please welcome the co-founder of Visionary Women, Angela Nazarian, and the president of the Hostetler-Wrigley Foundation, Sue Hostetler-Wrigley.
Hi, everyone. What a great show this has been. It's my honor to be presenting this prize with an extraordinary change maker, Sue Wrigley, whose life's work has been advocating for parity and equality for women.
Thank you, Angela. In creating this prize, we really wanted to recognize a visionary female leader of a US-based organization that has contributed significantly to the economic empowerment of all women.
In considering the nominees, we also gave particular weight to organizations that have addressed issues arising from the COVID-19 pandemic, which has had a disproportionately negative economic effect on women, especially women of color.
Most importantly, we looked for organizations that were doing innovative work to remove barriers to women's full participation and success in the workforce. We were blown away by all of the deserving organizations that applied, but narrowed it down to 5 outstanding finalists. You can find information on these organizations on the Visionary Women and Hostetler Wrigley Foundation websites. We also want to thank our exceptional jury who worked diligently to review the many qualified applicants who shared their stories with us.
And now we would like to announce the winners of the Visionary Prize and recipients of the $100,000 grant to support their organization's work.
Sherry Lawant and Dina Baxt, co-presidents and co-founders of A Better Balance, the Work and Family Legal Center. They are 2 female founders who built an organization advancing policy and legislation to combat discrimination and provide equity and economic security in the workplace for women who are also family caregivers.
Congratulations, Sherry and Dina.
Thank you so much, Visionary Women, for this great honor. Your dedication to supporting women to achieve their full potential also motivates the work that we do at A Better Balance, fighting to guarantee women access to critical supports and protections so they are not forced out of the workforce when they need to care for their loved ones. This work has become even more essential for millions of women in light of the effects of the pandemic. This award will help us continue to advance policies like paid leave and pregnancy accommodations that guarantee women such things as the ability to recover from childbirth, take a child to the doctor, care for a sick parent, without risking losing their jobs.
That's why we're so grateful this award will also allow us to respond to the growing demand for our free legal services and enforcement efforts so women and their families can remain healthy and financially secure.
We have more exciting news to share. Our jury was so impressed with the work of the other finalists, we decided to grant the runner-up Lyft a $25,000 award.
And Visionary Women will be granting each of the 3 finalists $10,000 as well. So on behalf of all of us, happy International Women's Day to all of you.
From the moment Cindy Crawford appeared on her first Vogue cover in 1986, this face and its equally famous mole became the de facto gold standard of American beauty. Today, the original supermodel is also known as a super mogul after she shifted focus from landing covers to leading companies. At the time, it was virtually unheard of for a fashion model to build a business empire, but Crawford blazed a trail into entrepreneurship, redefining what a model's career path could look like. She's now joined by the de facto ambassador of Hollywood and current executive at Netflix, Krista Smith. Both innovators explore the inner workings of building a business as a woman today. This is The Authentic Entrepreneur, presented by Merrill Lynch.
Hi, Cindy. It is great to see you. Happy International Women's Day. I can't think of anybody else I'd rather spend it with.
Well, thank you. Great to see you. It's been a while.
It's been a while. And I think about when I knew I was going to be speaking with you, I just had a flood of memories come back. Obviously, having started at Vanity Fair and really spent the majority of my career there until I moved to Netflix. Now I have a podcast doing so many other things, but you have been such a big part of that experience and also kind of my experience in this world when I think about it, you know, from watching House of Style on MTV, like to think about those, what you were able to do back then, being the first model that looked like you, first of all, dark hair, dark eyes, not this kind of sea of all American blonde, blue-eyed women that we were so used to seeing. I really feel like for me, you've always been the one and only, and I am absolutely so excited to talk to you and catch up and find out everything that you're thinking and doing now and thoughts on what you've done before and all of that stuff. So I'm just going to get right into it.
Let's do it.
All right. So on that, following that thread of you kind of being the first, you really were the first. And I can objectively say that, having been in journalism and witnessed that. You were Cindy Inc. We all remember the Pepsi commercial. We remember, like I said, the House of Style. You broke those barriers off of just being a model for hire, right?
I guess, yeah, it was, first of all, Vanity Fair is the one who dubbed it Cindy Inc. And I loved that. It's stuck, it kind of stuck. I like that idea. It empowered me as, in a way to realize that I had created a brand, and that gave me a platform. Before we talked about platforms and personal brands, that wasn't really a thing that people thought about then. You know, House of Style was something that fell in my lap. I think MTV was looking for someone that appealed to men and women. It had to be someone that had fashion credibility, but also appealed to what was more primarily male audience at that time. And I had just done Vogue and Playboy and the Pepsi commercial. So I was like a good mix of everything. And House of Style was such an amazing opportunity because it gave me a chance to get off of a two-dimensional page of a magazine and talk and show my personality and have fun. And that helped get me comfortable being in front of the camera, so that when I eventually did other things, I had that time to kind of develop, Cindy Crawford, so to speak.
As a woman in your 20s, like when you look back, what were you thinking then that you can't believe was your reality now that you are in your 50s and you look back?
Well, I for sure thought I would be retired at 25 as a model anyway. And I was like thinking, okay, I dropped out of school to model, which, I don't regret, but I was thinking now I'm at 25, I'm going to have to figure out like my next career. I never thought I would still be in front of the camera at, I'm 55, almost 56. In the beginning, you take any job that will pay. I remember my very first ad was for like a Cross Your Heart bra for Marshall Fields and the Chicago Tribune. I did that. I did, one of the weirder ones I did was for a drink in Japan called Pocari Sweat. And it was like an electrolyte replacement drink, but whatever, like people were paying you, you showed up, you put on what they told you, you did what they asked you to do within reason. And you said, thank you very much. But the more, the longer I was in that career, the more I wanted to be part of the people making the decisions.
But you really were authentic from jump, right? You were who you were from the day you stepped in front of that camera. And I know I can tell the, people tuning in now, the story about your mole, fighting to keep your mole on your face, literally and figuratively. People that told you to have it removed, we don't want that, a beauty mark, and then deciding absolutely not, I'm keeping it, and then having magazine editors remove it off their covers, right? So you literally had to put that in your clause for hire. No, keep me as I am. But what I think is really interesting about you is you've always been the same in terms of you show up on time, you're professional, you get the job done. There's a certain consistency, Cindy, that you've always had. And I feel like that enabled other people to maybe take a risk on you. It was an easy risk because they knew you were going to deliver. You were going to put your all into that. Can you talk about like that mindset? Was that learned or earned?
I definitely think I owe a lot to my parents and my Midwestern upbringing. So I always approached this fabulous world of fashion. I say that with like air quotes around it, that it was a job. It's what I do. It's not who I am. So the same way, if I had a job in an office or I was in college, which I was briefly, I showed up on time for class, or I showed up prepared with my homework, or when I babysat, I showed, all of those things, I showed up on time, I paid attention, I was prepared. And that's the same advice I give my children, even when my son had his very first job at a smoothie shop, it was like same advice that I gave Kaya when she started modeling: show up on time, be prepared, keep off your phone. That was something I had to add for this younger generation, because I feel like they get so buried in their phone that they aren't even paying attention to the people around them. And I learned so much from just being a little sponge. I just paid attention to what everyone was doing, the client, the art director, the photographer. And also that's how I made friends. That was how I found my community, my family, my found family.
Being in your 50s, like how do you feel in terms of confidence, or like what makes you insecure now in your 50s as opposed to
midriffs? What else? Like I've always, like, at any photo shoot, I'm like, look, I just don't do midriffs anymore. I'm sorry. Like Standing next to my daughter, I try to treat myself the way that I treat my friends. You know, when I see my friends, I think they look great and they are so like alive and confident and, you know, they know who they are. And, you know, I try to use that same lens. If only there were an Instagram filter for that, right?
Yeah.
That we see ourselves the way that we see our best girlfriends. But yeah, of course, I mean, I'm a regular woman. There's, you know, days where you're like, I joke, I'm like, oh, I went to pull my pantyhose up and realized it wasn't pantyhose, you know, it's just my skin. Just, you know, you realize you're like, wait, that's not my arm, that's my mother's arm or whatever. But I always say it's better than the alternative, and I'm so blessed. So it's like, yeah, we all get hung up on those little things, but I think if you are, you know, having a meaningful life, if you, whatever it is, whether it's your career or your philanthropy or your children or your relationship or your friendships or a great combination of all of those, then I think it's easier to, acknowledge like, that doesn't look the way it used to or whatever, but then get off of it really quickly and focus on the next great thing.
I've noticed in getting older, I'm comforted to know that you feel the same thing when you look at your arms, because I say that all the time. So I already feel better knowing that I share that in common with Cindy. But I feel like I've gotten more opinionated in a way. Like I feel more compelled to speak up and speak out, and you know, that see something, say something. I feel like my voice has gotten stronger and unrelenting in a way, and navigating how you do that and not be like, oh, okay, you know, old lady, even though we're not an old lady, but you know, that feeling of like, what do you have to say? Yeah. Okay. Boomer.
Really boomers, right? But I think that
Gen X.
Exactly.
But
you know, I think it's interesting because I wouldn't say a love-hate, but I have a love and love less relationship with social media. I mean, sometimes I'm just like not in the mood for it. It's this hungry little beast that just always needs fed. Also trying to figure out what I want to say. What am I, you know, and is it meaningful? Does it need to be meaningful? I also think that, you know, we all are aware that we live in a cancel culture right now. And I definitely try to think twice before I push post. But at the same time, like you, I do feel like, gosh, I mean, yes, I'm just a model, or maybe like, I know even I get sometimes annoyed when other celebrities are telling me who to vote for, let's say, right? But they're still human. So they're just like, I don't get mad at my neighbor if they have like a political poster in their yard. So why can't I? Like, it's different standards if you're a celebrity, but in a way you're just trying to share your opinion. So I kind of see both sides, and I'm definitely having some internal conversation about like, how do I want to use this incredible platform that I've built and a community that I think at this point I've earned their trust. Like, they kind of know what you see is what you get. So trying to figure out, how do I want to speak to them? It's interesting. I've never done this before, but this year I decided to work with a coach. I don't know if you've ever done that. Mm-hmm. And I found this woman, and she was saying, we actually had this conversation as one of our meetings. And she was saying, maybe the question you want to ask yourself about your social media is, can they feel you? Like, do they know what you're feeling? Because I'm so used to just like the visual and whatever. And I thought that was a really interesting question. I haven't really incorporated yet because we just had the conversation 2 weeks ago. But I kind of want to build toward that. Maybe that my messaging on social media becomes more about sharing, not so much who you should vote for or how you should feel about this, but kind of like my deep thoughts or whatever, because gosh, I have learned a lot over the years, and you can agree with me or not. If you don't, please don't be snarky on my Instagram, but I don't want to be quieted, I guess. And I think that's kind of what you were hinting at, right?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And the cancel culture, I mean, it is alive and well, but I also feel like you can't play the game when the rules are always changing. So at a certain point, it's like, if you are who you are and you are consistent in who you are, you have earned the right to have an opinion, as long as it's not harming children and hurting anybody or animals or any of that stuff. It's like, and I do feel it's really hard, especially where we are right now, because none of us have lived through this before. We don't know what the outcome of this is. Our kids are digital natives. I'm the same with you. Like, I've had to adapt because of work, and I've had to learn how to do it. And it wasn't natural. And I was like, oh, I can curate. Oh, I get this. But then it changes, right? And
just when you had it down, then all of a sudden, like, okay, that's looking like, oh, like that's so last month or whatever, like Instagram, it just constantly keeps reinventing itself. But one of the things you said that, that I find interesting is like, if you're consistently who you are, you earned an opinion, but also you've also earned the right to change your opinion.
Right.
I felt things at 20 and 25 that I totally believed and felt that maybe now I think differently about. I certainly don't want it to be like, well, you said 25 years ago, this one thing, because if you're not growing, like, if you're not willing to evolve and grow, then what are you doing? And I think that kind of goes back to what you were talking to me about, me and my brand and authenticity. Like, I'm my own customer. I always say, test it on supermodels, not on animals. And as I've shared that, I think that that's invited not every woman, not every man, but like some people that go, oh yeah, I like that. And then they'll come along, and you can't be everything to everybody, but the people that are interested, they know that I'm talking to them from like my own life experience, struggles, concerns, joys, whatever it is.
So, I mean, I know we have to kind of ease towards wrapping up here. I can't talk to you forever, but what is something that you really want to do next? Like, what's next for Cindy?
Oh, wow. I wish I knew the answer to that. I think that is part of why I started working with a coach, because it's like, okay, I still like, I feel like I have a lot of energy and I want to do stuff, but what? And the challenge, I think, and this is what I'm working through, is, does it have to be, people know me as, a model, fitness, beauty. Is my next chapter going to be an evolution of that, or could it be something totally different? I thought it had to be in this one box that it's a great box, by the way. I've been in it for a long time, and it's been, a very nice place for me. And it would be easy to, figure out something else. Obviously I've been talking about doing podcasts and this and that, but it'd be like beauty. And is that really, do I want to keep on that track, or is there something else for me? So I have enough kind of that kind of work that keeps me engaged and busy, but I'm also allowing myself time to figure out, like, ooh, is there something like way over here that I haven't even looked at yet? So It's kind of exciting. It's a little scary, but we'll see.
I feel like there's going to be some surprises. It's great to see you. Thank you so much for taking the time, and enjoy that Malibu. I hear the waves.
Well, happy International Women's Day.
For today's final My Vision, these four women share a united vision for the future.
Hi, my name is Agapi Stasinopoulos.
My name is Johanna Burton.
My name is Marshall Hilliard from Bank of America.
I am Marcela Celorio, the Consul General of Mexico in Los Angeles.
And on this International Women's Day 2022,
my vision for all people.
My vision for women.
My vision is to strengthen the mentorship, the importance of being a mentor of the young generations.
Is mutual respect based on a true understanding of both our shared and distinct lived experiences.
Is to take the time to help and praise one another, to strengthen not only ourselves, but the people and communities we support.
I have a big hope for every woman, that this is the year that we will light our fire.
I think when we were growing up, at least in my case, we were so afraid to be judged or to do something.
We as women are gifted with innate wisdom, with compassion, with generosity. We are the nurturers of humanity, the nurturers of the planet.
And I think that we have to be fearless.
Life is not about being liked or approved. Life is about stepping up to your light, to your fire, and lighting your spark, whatever it takes.
Happy International Women's Day.
And happy International Women's Day to us all.
And may we all thrive this year and step up to the plate.
We're going to be fearless in this 2022.
This has been the 2022 International Women's Day Virtual Summit. Our summit was brought to you by Visionary Women in association with Women Moving Millions. We want to extend a very special thank you to our production partners, Gracie Vision Productions. You can watch the summit anytime on the Visionary Women YouTube page or by visiting visionarywomen.com.